I've always heard that a language is one of the hardest things to learn.
Con I consigli di oggi spero di
So I decided to see if a normal human being, such as myself, could learn Spanish, and if so, what could that teach us? To do this, I decided to go to Mexico and completely immerse myself in the language, with one very specific desire. There's 3 sections in this video. First, we'll take a look at the story, which is how did I get here, and also what actually happened in Mexico. But more importantly, I'll show you that I'm just another normal human being, and I don't have some special language learning ability. Then we'll look at the 3 lessons that I learned from this incredibly challenging undertaking. And lastly, we'll take a look at some of the methods that I learned to accelerate the learning process. As with most people who took Spanish in high school, after graduation, I basically forgot all of it. In fact, in the United States, within 1 year of learning another language in high school, 60% of the students say that they only know basic phrases, and 30% of them say that they completely forgot what they learned. So if I, after 2 years of study, still couldn't communicate, the idea of 7 weeks in Mexico was starting to sound a little crazy. But this time, I wasn't only gonna try harder, I was gonna try different. My journey learning Spanish began at a 12-week Bible college where I learned vocabulary, but more importantly, I learned the rules of the language. Fast forward 6 months to me boarding a plane for Schrock, Mexico. There is nothing like waking up the first morning and remembering that you're in another country. Oh, and everything you hear doesn't make any sense. But thankfully, that was about to change. This is Mario, my Spanish teacher. A normal day in the life of learning Spanish looked something like this. We spent about 5 hours a day doing one-on-one tutoring in this spot, which is a little cafe. Basically, the entire session would be in Spanish, except if we needed to clarify something, obviously. We had a lot of fun together. We would play games and, have debates in Spanish, and I would give presentations sometimes. At 2:30, I would walk home to the family I lived with and spend the next 2 hours memorizing my daily vocabulary, which was about 20 words a day. And then the next 2 to 3 hours would be spent on the homework that I was assigned for that day. And then we would usually stay up late into the night talking, or, well, normally they would be the ones talking and I would be the one listening because they didn't speak English and my Spanish wasn't super great at the beginning. Saturdays we would have some kind of event. We would go hiking or explore a city or something like that. And then Sunday would be mostly relaxing, go to church, and basically rinse and repeat for 7 weeks.
Hello from Mexico.
Okay, so that's what I did. But what I can't describe to you is the feeling of sheer frustration that is learning another language. Because language is how we experience and make sense of our world. So when you choose to learn another language, you're choosing to experience and see the world in a totally new way. And that is really hard to do. I need to take a second and mention my family, because each person that goes through Spanish school lives with a family that doesn't speak English. And my family was incredible. They were so kind and so patient, and without that safe environment, I don't think I would have gotten very far. Mi mamá, mi comida favorita todavía es chorizo, aunque en los Estados Unidos es un poco diferente. By the end of 7 weeks, I could express myself in most situations
Es como un pájaro muriendo.
and understand 70 to 80% of the conversations that I was a part of. I still remember one time I was walking down the street and I met one of my friends that I had made in the community there. And we just stood there and chatted for 15, 20 minutes about life and whatever else. And afterward I was like, wait, what just happened? Like I just talked to him and never once thought about what language I was using. It just happened, which was just so cool. I'll never forget that moment. But that was after hundreds of hours of agonizing work. And when you do something that pushes you to the max, you learn things that only come through that intense struggle. I'd like to share a few of those with you. Number one, comfort is your enemy. I saw firsthand how I was drawn like a magnet to comfort, and how comfort was actively trying to avoid hard things. At first, almost everything was uncomfortable, so it was a lot easier to notice. But so many times where we forget this is in everyday life, where comfort is monetized and sold to us. And I learned that if I don't constantly keep pushing against that, my world will continue to shrink around me as I only do what feels the most safe and secure. Number two, admit incompetence. Learning can be a very vulnerable process because to learn, you first have to admit that you're incompetent in an area, that you are not God and you don't know everything. And we really don't like that sometimes. For me, this was a very humbling process because every day I would sit across from my teacher and for 5 hours straight, we would look at the areas that I was incompetent. And we would keep beating those areas over and over and over until I became competent in them. And that really was not fun. But if you can learn to admit incompetence in more than just the tiny obvious areas, right, that we all have, you will start to naturally just absorb knowledge from the world around you. We say that children learn faster than adults. I think a part of that is because it doesn't really bother them when they encounter something in their world that they don't know. Like for example, if I tell my youngest nephew, he's just learning how to talk, if I say, ese es fuego, he doesn't look at me and say, no, that's called fire. Like, I don't know where you got fuego from, but I know things and I know that that's called fire. So sorry, but you're wrong. Like, no, he assumes that maybe there's something in his world that he doesn't know yet. And he gets all excited about this new, exciting way to describe and interact with his world. That's called being teachable. And we're not very good at it. Number three, learn the rules of the game. The first time I tried to learn Spanish, I tried to do it without learning the rules first, thanks to Duolingo. So imagine my frustration when I'm sitting in Spanish class and I'm learning that hours and hours of my previous work all had to be undone and then redone correctly. In the same way, much of what we do in life has a set of rules that if we don't learn first, can really damage the process. I learned that it is very unwise to try to figure the rules out as you go. Learn the rules first, as much as you can, then start. I feel incredibly fortunate that I'm able to make videos like this. None of this would be possible without y'all's support. The sponsor that made this video possible is Skillshare. I've been using Skillshare for several years now, and what stands out to me about them is the concise informational material that they offer. Each one of their classes is carefully reviewed and given feedback. These classes cover a range of topics, such as business, art, productivity, and music, just to name a few. And something that they've expanded to offer this year is called Creator Paths. These are hand-picked classes for specific categories that maybe you know what you want to learn, but you don't know where to start. What these do is they bring these classes together for you and say, hey, if you're trying to learn this topic, here's some really good classes to get you from beginner level to more advanced. Something that I've benefited from recently is a creator path called Creative Productivity, talking about how to sustain and manage creative projects, especially Ali Abdal's class in there, where he talks about the organization of creative projects. Back to that whole, admitting incompetence thing, right? If this is something that you would like to be a part of or something that you feel like you could benefit from, there is a link down in the description, and the first 500 people that click that link will get 30 days for free. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. If you remember, I went to Mexico to see if a normal person such as myself could learn another language. What I discovered is that it has less to do with the person and more to do with the techniques that a person uses. Learning, like most things, is a skill, and it's something that you develop. And in Mexico, I learned a lot about developing this skill of learning. So very quickly, let me show you 3 things that I learned about accelerating the learning process. Number 1, embrace frustration. Frustration is actually a sign that you are learning. And I experienced enormous amounts of frustration every single day. What I learned is that without fail, the biggest learning breakthroughs always came right after some of the biggest moments of frustration. I actually started looking forward to that frustration because I knew that a day later or 2 days later, whatever I was learning was just about to click into place. Number 2, learning by association. Learning at its most basic level is taking something that is unknown and linking it to something that we already know. This is done by association. We use the thing we know to describe and give meaning to the thing that we don't know. This means that the more and faster we make those connections between the known and the unknown, the better we will learn and the faster we will learn. I can make a whole video about this, but I'll just give you a really short example. So let's say I'm learning the word table in Spanish. Mesa. Okay, so if all I do is say table, mesa, table, mesa, that is me making one association. Now, let's start stacking associations. So for example, we could see a picture of a table and hear the word mesa. We could see the two words in English and Spanish written side by side. We could write the word and say it. We could use it in a sentence. We could hear it in a sentence. Me gustaría destruir una mesa. We could imagine a mess on a table because mesa sounds like table and make an association that way. All of a sudden, we have like 10 associations connecting this known and unknown instead of just one. A big mistake most people make is when trying to learn something, they only make 1 or maybe 2 associations, and then they just do it over and over and over and over. And then a week later, when they don't remember it, they say, see, I'm terrible at learning. No, you just haven't learned the correct methods. 3, create an environment of learning. After about a week in Mexico, I realized that everywhere I went, I encountered Spanish, except for one place. My bedroom. So to fix that, I got a giant piece of paper and taped it above my bed. So whenever I learned something new, I would just write it and then review what I had written before. I also changed my phone into Spanish. I learned that as much as you can, try to saturate your environment with what you are learning so that everywhere you turn, no matter where you look, you are encountering and bumping up against the thing that you're trying to learn. Obviously that looks different depending on what it is. En caso de que quieras escucharme en español, voy a hacer este video de nuevo y ponerlo en mi canal de español. Is there something in this video that you want me to dive deeper into? If there is, reach out in the comments or send me an email. I would love to hear from you.